Assalamualaikum, ladies and gentlemen. We have done with the keynotes and the plenary speakers. Now, let us move on to our final agenda before the closing ceremony. We will have a forum entitled Integrated STEM Education, Issues and Challenge. Today, we will have 3 panelists and 1 moderator. The first panelist is Associate Professor Dr. Rachel Sheffield from Curtin University, Australia. Second is Assistant Professor Dr. Choy Heng from National Institute of Education, Singapore. And the third one is Dr. Kessara Amornvuthivorn from SEAMEO STEM Education, Thailand. Along with a moderator, Professor Dato Dr. Noraini binti Idris, Adjunct Professor in UMT and President of National STEM Association, Malaysia. The stage is yours, Dato.
Our MC today. Assalamualaikum and a very happy afternoon to all our panelists and of course our keen and excited audience to hear how we can integrate STEM, science, technology, engineering and mathematics. And normally we mention the word STEM regularly, but in the classroom we teach separately the science, the technology, the engineering, the mathematics as a subject individually. So today, for this forum, we were able to discuss and explore, should we integrate and why we should integrate and how we should integrate. So today, our panelists from Singapore, Thailand, and Australia will share with us the issue, challenges, and best practices. Without further delay, I would like to invite our first panelist, that is Associate Professor Dr. Rachel Sheffield from Curtin University, Australia. Pass to you.
Thank you and good afternoon, everybody.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm just going to share my slides.
Yes, please.
You can see those now?
Not yet.
Hopefully you can. It's saying it's sharing them now.
Yes, yes, we see that. Excellent.
Okay, thank you. So thank you very much. It's an honor to talk to you. And I know we were just talking about students. I've actually left a class of students to come and speak with you. So it's very much a very interesting topic, and I'm very pleased to be here. I think the first thing we have to talk about is what we are all talking about when we're talking about STEM education. I think the other thing is we need to be very clear on why it's important, because if we want to integrate just purely for integration's sake, then I think it's a lot of energy and effort for teachers in classrooms. So we need to know why it's important. And then we need to look at the challenges and issues, and we'll address some of them in an Australian context. And then we look at how we can teach it in a classroom setting. So I thought that was something, and all the photos I add, this is from our STEMinists, which is women in STEM. We have a STEMinist community, and the photos are from that program. Even the Wigglebot here on the right-hand side. So I think the first thing we need to start off is, what is STEM? Now, at its narrowest, we're talking about completely integrated STEM, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And in Australia, it's problematic, that term. We don't actually have engineering in our curriculum. So we need to be very thoughtful about what we want it to be. So I work on this premise. I talk about the deliberate full or partial integration of any or all of the key components. So I'm really clear that and I'm including not just content knowledge, but skills. So those are the 2 things I'm really interested in. I don't want to force it into all 4 areas. I think that does a disservice to what we're trying to teach. And I think the skills are really, really important. And that comes to us in why. Now, we talked just now, I heard you talk to my colleague in Singapore about COVID. Australia, especially West Australia, has no active cases of COVID. We're extremely lucky. We have no lockdown. However, we're still progressing with vaccination. But do you know, one of the most important things that COVID has done has been to really highlight STEM. Because if you look at this picture on your screen, it is very much around science, mathematics, engineering, and technology. We're using, so the top screen is the Johns Hopkins data, gathered that big data analytics around cases of STEM. We're talking about using mathematical modeling. We're talking about the science of the virus itself, and there's an electron micrograph of the virus, as well as successful PPE, which is what's also illustrated. I don't think there's been a time in my lifetime where there's been so much discussion around STEM, around how the virus is transmitted, around who gets sick and who's protected, about how the different vaccines work. It's been terrible to have that conversation, but it's been amazing to see it in our community. And I would like to say to you, this is one of the reasons that we have to keep persevering teaching STEM and teaching it in an integrated way. Because when the mathematicians are modeling the mathematics, they don't say, I can't do any more. They actually go and talk to the scientists and say, tell me what you know. Tell me what's the efficacy of that particular version of the vaccine that you're creating. So it's a very, very lovely, but terribly, terribly sad situation that we find ourselves in. For me, even before COVID, I think that STEM is important for its skill sets. And I put to you, I think that we use STEM very much around the transversal competencies to teach collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. So I'm very, very much in that way of thinking. And then when I teach STEM to my students in the tertiary space, I'm focused not just on the content knowledge, but also on these skills. Wider than that, we're expanding it a little bit. These are the transversal competencies from UNESCO. I don't know if they're familiar to you. In Australia, we have our own general capabilities, which we use to inform on the production of the UNESCO transversal competencies. And we see all this language coming in, especially for teachers in primary and secondary classrooms, that this language is really important. We need to teach students to be thoughtful, to be good decision makers, to have teamwork, to demonstrate empathy as well as collegiality. We need to have interpersonal skills, so perseverance, compassion, integrity and risk-taking, and then the notion of being a global citizen. And as we're in a pandemic together, there's no bigger situation than having students understand the importance of being a citizen of the world. So I think these are what I really focus on when I'm thinking about STEM, and I think these are why STEM is incredibly important. This is another of our STEMinist work. So there's a pre-service teacher. These guys are building a pipeline, and it's an engineering activity for them in the classroom based on their cooperation and collaboration together. So there's a mixture of communication to achieve their task. And so if we think it's important, and I think we do think it's important, then what are the challenges and how do we overcome them? Well, the challenges are numerous, and I'm sure that they're probably the same, and I'm interested to see what my colleague in Singapore and in Thailand say about this. But for me, the challenges in schools is about making it relevant. I think the old days are gone when we can teach things that are compartmentalized, they're not related to context, and students can't see purpose and value in them. So I think relevance is really important. I think we have a very overcrowded curriculum, and therefore it becomes very much about racing through content. And that is a real challenge for teachers, especially in secondary classrooms. We also have the silo approach to subjects and also to assessment. And the problem with assessment too is that skills and competencies are difficult to assess. It is much easier to assess content knowledge in science. It's right, it's wrong. It's a formula we use. It's much more difficult to finesse the changes in behavior that comes around demonstrating good collaboration or communication skills. We, as I said, in Australia have an issue with E. So we call it, we don't have engineering per se, we do have inquiry. So where does the E fit? And then there's the normal fighting about the inclusion of A for art, M for medicine, R for reading, and then we don't just get a stem with leaves, we get a tree with roots and everything else. It gets complicated. And in Australia too, we've had a reduced number of students engaging in STEM subjects. And I wonder if that's the consequence to the fact that they don't see it as relevant. They have the overcrowded curriculum and the silo approach. And if we did it differently in schools, then maybe students would feel more engaged and more interested to participate. So that's particularly in secondary classrooms. And I don't know if that's changed with COVID. As I said, so that's something we haven't looked at. One of my colleagues put this together and I really, really liked it because she talks about, she was an engineer, and she talks about the connectedness of how science and maths provide the backgrounds. Engineering is about design fluency and design creation, and then technology is about putting it into action. But right in the middle sits the values, needs, and the economy of society. And when that is overwhelmingly, as it is in COVID, it's very driven, it's driving very strongly the rest of this circle in the science, the maths, the engineering, and the technology. So I think it's a very holistic, someone's used the word holistic, I really like it, very holistic way of looking at how they fit together. So I think people are saying to me, okay, well, you've talked about it. What does it actually look like? And there's two ways that I particularly like doing it. I do it from a problem-based approach, and I use a project-based approach. With the problem-based approach, I'm using something like the Hasner-Plattner model, which is around design thinking, and gives students a nice, rich, wicked, real-world problem to solve. And they use that problem to do a design focus. They bring in their science and their content, and they investigate what they need to find out. Who are the end users? Who are we solving the problem for? And then we are coming up with solutions. So I do that, and we use, as I said, the problem-based learning models. And the other way is the project-based learning, and then I create maker spaces. I create maker spaces for my students here at university, and we look at skills focus. And so we'll teach creativity, and we will look at how we might do that in a classroom for a group of primary students. So I do actually do this with my work with my students, but before I sound too amazing, but I don't get to do it in mainstream. I have to teach these as my options units. But in that saying that, they're one of the most popular options units that run. There's two that run, and they are incredibly popular because students really enjoy getting into trying to design wicked solutions for wicked problems, and they really enjoy working creatively in a maker space with the project-based learning. So this was, we've worked in Indonesia, we've worked in Malaysia. This is some of our work in India as well. These are some of our STEMinist community making a whole range of activities in the maker spaces. So that was some of the work that we've been doing. So I think I'll probably stop there because I know I only have 10 minutes and I don't want to overstay my welcome. And I know I have colleagues to draw on for their conversations as well. So
Thank
I don't
you.
know if you want to
Thank you.
do questions afterwards
No,
or whether
yeah, we'll do the question after all the three panelists as shared. Yeah, thank
Yep.
you very much. Very excellent, very inspiring. And yes, we are looking forward for more ideas and then to collaborate further. So without further ado, I would like to invite our second panelist, Associate Professor Dr. Choy Heng from National Institute of Education, Singapore. Pass to you, Prof.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Right. So I'm just going to build on Rachel's point about the STEM and the importance of STEM. So I shall not repeat it because I think everybody agrees that STEM is important and it's definitely relevant for today's world. So I thought I would really start by highlighting three challenges of integrated STEM. And of course, the first thing is what to teach. I mean, that's that's what all teachers will be asking. You know, what's the content? And here, I think we have, two extremes. On one hand, we want to think about the disciplinary aspect of STEM. Now, it is important still to recognize that science, mathematics, engineering, and technology are four different disciplines. Each of them have their own disciplinary traditions. There is still value in each of the disciplines, and each of the disciplines provide a different perspective of the world. And so I think one of the things that many teachers struggle with is, how much of the disciplinary traditions do I need to convey in integrated STEM? And it is an interesting question which demands some form of answers. Like for example, in mathematics, there's still some importance in being able to solve equations because that's like a basic skill in mathematics. And without the ability to solve equations or even to think about equations or to even understand equations, it is difficult for them to model the real world. So on one hand, you have this disciplinary issue. On the other hand, you also have transdisciplinary skills to teach, or even competencies, like what was mentioned, collaboration, communication. These are transdisciplinary competencies, and these are important ones. Critical thinking, or even creative thinking. In Singapore, we call it, creative and inventive thinking. So there's the aspect of that design or engineering element in it. So how to strike the balance? Because eventually we need both. We need to have some form of deep disciplinary understanding, and at the same time, the ability to have some of these transdisciplinary competencies. And so that's the first challenge, content. The second challenge is really something to do with this idea of integration. And we talk about integration, what makes STEM integrated? Or what do we mean by integrated STEM? Definitely, we are not talking about S, T, E, and M separately. And so the key thing here is connections. I think if there's one word that we can use to kind of characterize integrated STEM, that will be connections. And when we talk about connections, there's at least two levels that we can look at. One is within the discipline, because within the discipline itself, there are connections between different topics. And teachers are already struggling with making connections within the discipline. And that's why sometimes, I think students find STEM subjects or STEM disciplines very dry because they don't see the connections between the different topics. They see them as silos of knowledge. Today I'm doing algebra, tomorrow I'm doing calculus, but there's no connections between them. And also connections between discipline, which is important, because between science and mathematics, there are connections. And I like what Rachel shared just now, the connections between science, mathematics, and engineering or design thinking. That whole connections between the different disciplines is something that needs to be emphasized. And I think that's what brings out the relevance. So it's not about, do we emphasize connections within the discipline, or do we emphasize the connections between disciplines? Again, it is about both. And I think that's the challenge, And the third challenge is competencies. And now we are getting a little bit personal. And now we are getting into the competencies or mindsets that we need. Teachers, all of us, what kind of competencies do we need? What kind of mindsets do we need? I was listening to the computational thinking lecture just now, and it was very inspiring. We all want to inculcate computational thinking in our students. But what does it mean for teachers? Does it mean that we have to pick up computational thinking ourselves? Do we need to learn how to code? Do coding? Are we supposed to pick up any programming language? And I think here is something that we need to bear in mind. Some people thought of teachers as a Da Vinci teacher. I don't know whether you know what I mean by a Da Vinci teacher. Da Vinci is one of those very famous scientists. You can call him a scientist, you can call him an artist. He's like a Renaissance man. He's good in everything. He's also a mathematician, by the way. But very few of us are Da Vinci teachers, because we don't have all the expertise. In fact, if you ask me, I'm trained in mathematics and science, but I'm more comfortable with mathematics. And if you ask me to do engineering stuff, I probably won't be comfortable. So it's not about having a Da Vinci teacher, but rather a teacher who is able to collaborate with others. So it is about a shift in mindset that, my classroom is not my own anymore. Now I may have to even consider the possibility of co-teaching. And in reality, this is something that is worth thinking about. Teachers need to have a shift in mindset. We need to realize that our classroom is no longer private. We have to learn how to collaborate with one another. And we have to also adopt the mindset that we are able to see connections between subjects and within the subjects. And this idea may be related to the whole notion of horizon content knowledge. But we also need to deal with ambiguity, because now things are no longer the same. Things keep changing. And do we have that kind of mindsets? But students also have issues, right? And because students are used to, I don't know about other countries, but in Singapore, students are very used to the traditional form of teaching. And when you do something different, they will say, is there something wrong with my teacher today? Or did my teacher work out on the wrong side of the bed? And so students also have to learn to be able to see connections. They have different expectations. They need to develop habits of mind in order to view some of these challenges. So I think these three challenges are not easy, and I think this is something that is worth thinking about. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer, but we do have some ideas which we invite our participants to think about, and perhaps we can have discussion around this. So my colleagues and I, we kind of have developed a framework to help teachers to think about integration. And so I'm going to offer three ideas here very briefly. First, again, they're similar to what Rachel has highlighted, problem-based learning and project-based learning. And this is what we call a problem-centric integrated STEM instructional framework. In other words, the center of the integration is problem. Find a nice problem. Find a wicked problem, something that requires students to work on together. In fact, it will be even better if we can get students to pose their own problem. because problem posing is actually a very important skill. So sometimes we leave the problem open. We say, okay, we are now designing a village for the elderly. Now you choose your own problem. Which aspect of designing a village for elderly do we want to explore? Is it about the traffic crossing? Is it about the amenities? Is it about certain devices that we need to put in the house so that when they need help they can get some help, or what? So I think it's important to think about that. And what we are trying to do in this framework is to frame the problem solving process. So if you look at the outer ring, that's the problem solving process, and the lines that indicate the level of connections. So by using this framework, we can get teachers to start thinking about the connections between the S, T, E, and M, as well as the problem itself. But the problem-centric approach is often difficult for many teachers because it's very open. So one other approach that we have tried is this idea of a solution-centric approach. In other words, we start with the solution. What's the existing solution? Then we ask, can we make the solution better? And this basically engages the students in a series of design thinking processes in terms of innovating and improving the design of current solution. And through the design and improving of current solution, we can actually emphasize the connections between the 4 disciplines. Last but not least, which is very important, is the human-centric or the user-centric way of integrating STEM. In other words, we start from the user. Who is our end user? And then find out from the end user, what kind of design is needed? What kind of needs does the user have? What kind of problems, do they have? And we kind of specify the requirements and then produce the design solutions. And through this whole process, put human at the center of the design thinking process. So by thinking about the center of the instructional framework, we can then kind of offer at least 3 different ideas of doing integrated STEM. And I think I'm about to stop there, but just to round off, but the challenges still exist. Yeah, I think there's still a lot of challenges, and I'm looking forward to hearing from Kessara and also maybe the questions and discussions that we have. Thank you.
Excellent. It's really well supported from our first panelist and also the second panelist. Now it's up to us. Which one do we want to adopt? What type of framework? Whether when the user at the center or the problem or the situation. So all right. So I think let's hear our third panelist. Let's invite our Dr. Kessara from SEAMEO STEM at Thailand. Pass to you, Doctor.
Good afternoon, everyone. And yeah, it has been nice to hear from Rachel and Dr. Choy about your perspective to integrated STEM. And my presentation will reiterate the importance of the STEM, whether it's integrated, connected, or different forms, right? And then I would like to propose alternatives that how schools, school leaders, teachers, educators can work together in helping the student learn to achieve the extended goals that we want to see them contributing to our society. So I have trouble going to the slide, but can I do like this without blowing up the screen? Let me see. So
Yes.
I like to share with you that based on the OECD 2030 learning framework, which I think it's quite a good framework to help us revisit that what we expect our students to achieve in terms of the learning goals, and what is the current situation when we see many schools implementing STEM. I believe that it's the patterns are similar to what Dr. Choy and Dr. Rachel has been mentioning, and I would like to propose alternatives, solutions to what we are now doing. When we look at this OECD learning framework, I think it's quite a good framework to help us realize that because of the rapid changing world like what we are now facing, right? I think the kids in the next generation will face even more challenges in the change, the dynamics of the globalizations. So they need more sophisticated skills to cope with that change. Unlike our generations, right? The competition will be more because of the mobilization of the workforce, right? The problems will be changing quite rapidly, the advanced technology change. And I think in education sector, the way we adapt ourselves to the changing world is not much. I've been in private sector before. I know that they have to change all the time because they don't have budget. They have to earn income and revenue. So they have to compete a great deal, right? But I think in higher education, we also have seen a lot of change in terms of decreasing population and young generations that they might change their mindset about graduations or earning a degree, right? So when we take a look at the competencies that our young people have to acquire to contribute to the well-being of our planet, our societies, they need to have multiple skill set. They would like to We would like them to be change agent, right? To change the world. We would like them to survive in an unchanging society, and many more, right? To work with technology that has been very advancing. So we expect a lot from them. And in this learning framework, they propose that the schools have to work with the communities, work with stakeholders, to support this learning experience so that kids can engage in the real world problems like Dr. Rachel and Dr. Choi said. And I think it's very, very crucial that schools should not perceive themselves as a closed unit anymore. They have to work with communities, with stakeholders in order that the problem posed to students is relevant to the real world problem and also relevant to the career uh, opportunity for them so that they can have a higher motivation to succeed in the changing world careers. And the current situations, I think, they cover many patterns that both Dr. Choi and Dr. Rachel has mentioned about different types of the STEM learning experience. But yeah, there might be some countries that start to embed the kind of learning activities that try to promote the cross-cutting concepts, even though it's still within the subject of science, uh, as what we have been aware about the next generation science standards. And yes, they try to think of cross-cutting concept and focus on the practices. And yes, we also seen a lot of engagement by stakeholders in promoting extracurriculum learning activities through problem-based or project-based learning. And I would like to point to the last idea about how we can introduce the career education, career awareness that lay the foundation of how students can acquire the competencies in order that they can advance in their career. And I think when we introduce this mechanism, it's automatically that we have to involve employers in the career education. And by involving external stakeholders, I think education communities can learn a lot about what competencies that employer expect from students. Because if comparing to educators working alone, I think sometimes they cannot imagine that what competencies that the employers look forward from students, from their employees. And because in many countries, like in Thailand, the advancement of economic growth has been driven by private sector. And yes, they can transfer the knowledge, transfer the know-how, and also inspire our kids that what skill set that they need to learn. And when coming to the crowded curriculums, I think the private sector, employment sector maybe can take part that what actually essentials for our young people to succeed. Because when they recruit staff to work for them, they have to retrain in many areas anyway. Many in-depth skills our education cannot provide anyway, because it varies from industry to industry. But what should be the foundation skills that our kids can leverage from these basic skill sets so that they can advance in the future when they go to the career? So my proposed alternatives, I would like to share with you the re-engineering concept. Corporation has been changing a lot during the past 3-4 decades. And I would like to raise this re-engineering because I think it's one of the paradigm shift when corporation change their process. For example, in this slide, you'll see that when they think about R&D of certain products, before re-engineering, these R&D staff, they work in isolations, right? And they just collect their integrated, their separate products to be an integrated products. But after re-engineering, they re-engineer the process in order that the R&D staff work together from the starting point and try to come up with the new products and services that these staff work together in coming up with the product that is more complete, right? And then more responsive to the client. Similarly, I think that in the school context, like what Dr. Rachel have been saying, I agree that in education sector, may I say that actually in both the basic education and higher education, I've seen silos of disciplines, right? If we can tear down those silos and let them work together through the leadership and commitment from school leaders or university leaders, and let them work together and focusing more on the competency of student as a holistic manner, in a holistic manner. And this has to take into consideration that the core skills should not be neglected. The core skills like literacy and numeracy, these are core competencies that we still observe a big gap in many underserved schools, in which students still cannot perform well or underperform. And I believe that if the pre-service institution can prepare the new generation of teachers in the way that they work together across disciplines, I think it will help them to to become the teachers that we would like to see, that they can collaborate with each other. And I think by involving community members and employers, the problems that posed by these stakeholders, it will become integrated manner automatically, because when the problem need to be solved, they don't need to separate whether it's what discipline, right? So the problem is the focus of how students can come up with solutions. And at the end, I think the policymakers need to support quality learning resources that help students learn better. The assessment, like Dr. Rachel, what you said about how we assess the competencies, which is more challenging than content-based assessment, and the grant support for the such projects that promote the problem-based or project-based learning to integrate the different disciplines, and how to promote the model or mechanism that we involve external stakeholders to create the learning experience that more relevant and more meaningful for communities and for their career advancement. So
All right.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. So now we'll open to a question from the audience. Is there any question? While waiting for the question, I would like to ask Prof. Rachel, like you have mentioned about the difficulty on the assessment, content or the discipline, or just now. So how did in Australia they do the assessment? I've seen that there's a lot of rubric also being shared just now. So maybe we can a little share with us a little bit on that.
In our curriculum, we have the general capabilities, and the general capabilities have been organized in elements or domains and subdomains. And so, unlike the transversal competencies, which have come out of UNESCO, which are just words, they've actually looked at how students should be progressing along those general capabilities through those domains, and at what level, and they should be reaching them at what age. However, it's not assessed because it's not reported on. And also, the general capabilities sit outside of the content areas, so they always belong to somebody else. So maths will do it, art will do it, French will do it, and they don't get done, which is a shame, because the time and energy spent doing them hasn't been really realized, but they are there. And I think into the future, we have to mandate that they are included in our assessment. But, then we burden teachers with, so I was talking to a teacher yesterday. She had 300 students to write comments about in a primary space. I mean, that's just normal comments. If you're trying to report on these levels as well, which are contentious, it's problematic. So I don't know if you encourage students to self-assess and you do some work around that. I think that may be helpful. As they get bigger, they can self-moderate and manage themselves. Maybe you get them to work on these, but it's not something that's done well, but it's something I think we're very, very, we really, really need to look into. And I notice, Kessara, thank you so much, Dr. Kessara, for your talk as well. I notice we're all saying the same thing, and it's really heartening to hear that we're all coming towards the same points from different directions. And our actual minutiae are different, our complexities are different, but we're all thinking around the same way. And I think that's incredibly heartening that we're all coming down this pathway together. I think that's going to be very helpful.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Rachel. Still waiting for other question. So I'd like to ask Prof. Choy, yeah? Singapore has been #1 in PISA or TIMSS ranking, yeah, for mathematics and science. So now I noticed that Singapore also planning, to go for 5G, and I see that your industrial, because I've been following every night at 10 o'clock news about Singapore. So how did all this STEM that be able to really flourish the achievement of the students and also the country economic, especially related to STEM? Pass to you, Mr. Choy.
Okay, that's a very interesting question because I'm not sure whether I got the necessary pay scale to answer the question, but I will try my best. Coming from my former position in a different capacities. Um, I think to begin with, Singapore's achievement in TIMSS and PISA was not an accident. It was actually after many years of careful planning and dedication of teachers on the ground, and we have a quite, I would say, quite a coherent curriculum, which emphasize basics, but at the same time, we move with the times. So just to give you an idea, every 6 years we have a curriculum review. So the syllabus is kept up to date, in some sense. But at the same time, we also don't try to change too much. Because there are some important skills that is needed, at the basic level. But what we are trying to do here is to encourage teachers to start looking at connections, looking at STEM in a more integrated manner. So there's autonomy and support given to some schools. In fact, most of the schools will have some of this support to implement STEM programs. So in relation to one of the questions asked just now, whether there's co-teaching in Singapore schools, the answer is yes. Some of the schools have what we call STEM programs that they kind of initiate on their own, and they have the support of the leadership, the school leadership, to run some of these programs. Of course, we have quite specialized STEM schools, if you want to call it STEM schools. We do have what we call specialized STEM schools. They are actually not STEM schools in the US kind of sense, but they are specialized in some area because they are independent schools. By independent means they are free to carve out their own curriculum. So they have some restrictions, but they have relatively more freedom to do so. So in some way, we kind of let 1,000 flowers bloom. If you understand that phrase, we have different pockets of ground up initiatives, from schools. And what the ministry is supporting is in terms of funding, is in terms of expertise, and in terms of being a matchmaker. If this school want to do some of these programs, well, go and find someone who is expert in this, and matchmake the schools so that things can happen. And sometimes we even find industry partners. So that there are different policies, there are different programs all happening at the same time, and sometimes they just flow in a similar direction, but slowly. I don't think it's a fast change and things like that.
You. Right.
Okay.
Thank you, Prof. Choy. All right. So, Dr. Kessara, you talk about a lot on leadership and the mindset. So,
Yes.
how it from SEAMEO role, to on this towards STEM. Pass to you,
Yeah.
Dr. Kessara.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Yes, I think, yeah, mindset shifting is the first step, right, to any change process. And I think for teachers and educator to be aware that how STEM is crucial for student future careers, right? So I think organizing an event in a way that employers can share with teachers, educators, that what skills are very crucial for our future, and let them share that the student where they accept now, recruit now, what is a gap, right? And or even do conducting an externship in order that our teachers can visit factories, right, site, so that they learn from the real world experience that how existing workers work, how they solve problems, right? So I think providing an experience for our educators is very crucial to them, for them to understand the real world experience. Yeah.
Thank you. Right.
Dato,
So I think to sum up,
Dato
yes,
Noraini, could I have a verbal question, please?
yes, please, yes.
Yes, yes. This is addressed to any of the panelists, probably Prof. Rachel. Okay, I'm from a rural-based school in Sarawak. My question is, with all these STEM things, we are having a challenge in the sense that when you give a project or an assignment to our students, we are too confined with a preset answer and solution. In where we are governed by some kind of model answers. So what is your view on that? Should we still continue with this preset answer module? With the permission, dengan izin, contoh jawapan, modul jawapan. So I think this is not in line with the real
Pastor,
aspirations of
we are
them.
running out of time now, so I think I'll pass to Prof. Rachel. Is it
Thank
good
you.
to have a
Thank you.
model answer, especially for the rural area, so that they be
That's right.
able to do well in their performance? Pass to you, Dr.
Thank you.
Rachel. Thank
Well,
you.
I have to argue you have to change the assessment. And no disrespect to my colleague in Singapore, but they write the tests, so they should be good at it. Which I'm not sure. I think that some of the students, they are the best and most creative in rural areas. They're problem solvers from an early age. They have to be, and they're often really awesome at it. So I would persevere with encouraging that creativity and that critical thinking. And I know I'm on a tight time frame, so I'll stop there. But I think it's so important, and I think you persevere. I really do, because for me that's value. That's about solving real problems rather than just regurgitating facts and data information.
Yes, yes. So I think next time we should have 3 hours instead of 1 hour.
Please.
Because there's a lot of interesting issue from different perspective that we have been talking here. Assessment, definitely, because assessment that gear and then guide our pedagogy and our way of teaching, yeah, and also must be supported by the leaders, either in the school or policy makers. So there's a lot of issues here. Maybe we will maybe Prof. Laili, the organizer of ICSTEM today, will organize a 3 hours forum. Will be more time to talk. Okay. So I think without further ado, thank you very much, Prof. Rachel, Prof. Choy, and Dr. Kessara, for all your great sharing and lovely, and also all the audience. So thank you very much. We're looking forward for you for further collaboration in other occasion. So with that, thank you very much, and pass to you back our MC.
Thank you.
Thank you.
MC, pass to you back.
Thank you to Professor Dr. Noraini, Assistant Professor Dr. Choy, Dr. Kessara, and Associate Professor Dr. Rachel for the fruitful forum. With all the honorable guests here with us today, let us all cherish the moment by taking photos together. All guests are invited to switch on your camera for the photography session. In count of 1 to 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. One last shot, freestyle. The closing ceremony will begin shortly. I seek your attention to stay in the WebEx platform for the closing ceremony. Thank you.